evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Positude podcast. I'm your host, Maggie Hart. Very excited to be here for another week, sharing positive news, stories, hopefully some information, and just enjoying each other's company. One thing I've noticed this week, a theme that's come to my mind, is as I was listening to some other podcasts, there has been a distinct trend, at least in what I've been drawn to listen to. And as you all know, because of my gifts, when I get an indication or an inclination of something that's happening either on the planet or a vibration or just a trend that I'm seeing, I listen to that. In the morning, I'll get up and I'll do my meditation and I'll do my prayer work. And as I'm starting my day, having my coffee, I'm listening to things. I'm checking out what's happening around the world, looking for current events, and inevitably there is a video that will pop up in my suggested list, or something as I'm scrolling will come to my attention, and I get the indication that I need to pay attention to that. And this week particularly has been a trend of Native American cultures and Native American speakers talking about what's going on in our country and around the world and what we could do to change it and what their cultures have done previously that have kept the earth cycles going in what we would like to see be a positive pattern. However, in light of recent events in the past couple of years, things seem to have gone haywire. And what I'm hearing in these interviews that I listen to is the frustration and the sadness of the people that originally were here in the United States and in Canada, and their sadness over what's happening to the land, to the country, and to the people as a whole. The messages that people had to share had been primarily geared toward what their ancient cultures believed, what has been handed down to them verbally, generation to generation. What was the origin of our planet? What was here before we were? What was here as we developed our communities on the planet, and their tribes were growing and they were hunting wild animals and they were living off of the land. And who did they worship and why did they worship the deities that they did? Depending on the culture, overwhelmingly, Native Americans worship the Great Spirit, although they have, depending on the sect of their tribes, where they came from, the Buffalo Woman and the legends that surround all of these people that have become part of their history, part of their myths, part of their legends and lores. It's always been that there's been the great creator, the great spirit, and in conjunction with that, sometimes what I might call, might not be an appropriate term, but demigods. These beings, whether they be physical or not, brought information to the different tribes and they worshipped them. What I find very interesting, though, is in light of my recent study of Jesus and the Essenes, there appears to be parallels in this aspect as well in so many aspects of different cultures, particularly in this sense the Native American culture, that are very parallel to Christianity, and in particular to the Essenes. My theory is and has been all along, and I just mentioned this on a couple of podcasts ago, that all of the cultures and all of the religions each have pieces of knowledge. And if everyone came together and shared all of the knowledge that they had openly and transparently, we would have so many different missing pieces to the puzzles of questions that we've wanted answered for, it seems like, eternity. And the underwriting thought process through some of these cultures is that we are all one. We are all part of the same creator. And we all are in battle with the same kinds of dark forces, even in some aspects of different religions. And I just find the parallels as well as the differences entrancing, for lack of a better word. Now, we can go through the whole Great Flood, and that's stating the obvious. A lot of cultures, pretty much every culture across the planet, has some story told about the Great Flood. However, this interview that I was listening to with this Lakota man, Chase Iron Eyes, on a show, it's Aubrey Margus podcast. Apparently he's a famous podcaster. I've never listened to his show before, but again, after my prayer and meditation, this video was just, it showed up, and so I was geared to listen to it. And this man has some incredible wisdom and knowledge to share that I'd like to play some clips from for you, so that it helps to sort of support some of what I'm saying and what I'm thinking. So let me play the first clip for you in regards to, well, he starts off by saying that they have a few different origination stories. One is the female buffalo who breathes air into a blood clot, and that is how their people were created. That's one of their theories. And it also, for his people, shows how closely in relationship they are to the buffalo. And there are several tribes, apparently, that do feel very, very close with, and a connection with, and possibly part of origin with, maybe the buffalo. But let's hear what he has to say about humanity and white people. And I think some of you might find this surprising. By the way, he also speaks about religion, and he feels, as I do, that religion is probably one of our biggest setbacks, is because different religions try to change what we thought, or change what we knew, or direct us and tell us, as well as the educational systems, what they wanted us to believe. In this segment, he's talking about the origin of his people and how different tribes are related to the buffalo, and how it's not something that the human mind could comprehend. It's more of a spiritual thing, is I think what he's leading toward. So let's listen.
Connections, those cosmological connections, those cultural, mythological connections, they speak to something that is beyond reason. It's beyond what the human mind is trying to think about, or that is capable of analyzing. But like I said, I grew up in an American school system on the reservation, so I learned about what came from Western civilization, and what came from there during what we call the Enlightenment, in American Western education systems. Rationalism, scientific supremacy, empiricism. Science is a truth. Science is what it is. It is a truth. But what has happened is that the religions, well, there's a longer story there about religions, but if religions are good, then they're leading a human being toward a sacred metaphysics, a sacred reality And that's not what has happened with Western civilization. And something else has happened, which has led us to kind of a spiritual dead end, maybe. But those who now call themselves white people were once and are indigenous people. They're capable of the same, sacred cosmologies, lived cosmologies, expressed cosmologies, ritual and ceremonial cosmologies that we still have as native people here. It's just that whatever happened with Rome and the way that they took over
empire,
the church and so forth. All the European people were subjected to that colonization before us, and so when now we're all here. Now we're all in America, and we're all searching. We're all seeking a sacred connection, and we want to know how can we connect? How can we deconstruct the metaphysics and the myths that we were taught either in school or we just learned, and whether that's the self or the ego or even the myth of anthropocentric supremacy, like we teach ourselves that we're the apex of creation, and that's just not how that's not how I was taught. That's not how my people view things.
What is the way that your people view things?
We're the human beings are the youngest of creation, of God's children. We were the last, and we have to learn everything of how to have a divine order and how to have a civilized way. We learn that from the older beings, the older relatives, the four-legged beings, the winged beings. Our prophet, or not, I don't know about prophet, that might not be the right word, but there was a woman who brought our people the sacred pipe, which was at the sweat lodge, at the Oinikaga, the Inipi. And these are complex, very powerful ceremonies that we still have, that are our sustenance and provide a way to salvation and deliverance. But even in our metaphysics, the mind, which is the seat of reason and free will and self-determination, very, very powerful. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to downgrade it, but the mind is the lowest on the totem pole in our system of cosmological order. It's still very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But in our way, we're the youngest and the smallest and the most humble, I should say.
Would you say, and it seems to me, obviously I've been steeped in the medicine lineages of many different cultures and many different medicines, and it would probably extend back to the rock nations, the water nations, like the rock and water and fire beings, and the elementals are probably like our oldest relatives. And then even older than that are the old, cosmological divine relatives, the origin, the source relatives of where we are, and then it moves into the life and into life and those relatives. But it's actually it's kind of a beautiful way to look at it, as we're actually the youngest and then going back to the oldest. And one of the things that really struck me that I'd never heard is you spoke of a deity, of a being that was prior to Wakantaka, and that being was Eon.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that origin story of like divine creation.
Well, Wakatanka is all of those. And it's one of those things that's almost beyond naming. It's beyond that. It's on a different, transcendence. But we do have creation knowledge. And it starts when there was a time of, in the English language it's called darkness. But in our language it's called Ha. So like when we talk about the moon, it's Hawi. It's the sun of the night, of the dark. But darkness, a lot of people think darkness is like nothing, right? But it's definitely not nothing. Now I think of dark matter and dark energy.
Yeah, like the pregnant void of all creation.
That's right. Yes, sir. Like it's there. And so at that time in our knowledge there was this primordial spirit, a god, a deity, and its name is Ea. Now we hand it down with the male personification and say that it's a he. But again, since I had daughters, like they're like, why has it got to be a he? So
Okay, so in just that segment with Chase Iron Eyes and Aubrey, a couple of things were brought up, and I was just giggling and smiling as I was listening to him say, essentially, that we are all one people, which, having been very close friends with a tribe, a chief in one of the tribes in a local nation that I reside in, there always was an undercurrent, an unspoken dislike or disgruntlement with white people. And as the chief and I got closer and became more friendly, he opened up to me a lot more, and at times expressed a general disdain for most white people. There were very few that he was very close with, that he took under his wing, so to speak, no pun intended, and taught them, and like myself, and told me stories of his people, and just shared general companionship with. Even though he was a very famous chief, and he spoke all over the country and gave lectures, and on the surface was very affable and friendly, there was always that undercurrent of white people, and especially Christianity. So it was refreshing to see and to hear Chase Iron Eyes' description of white people and how we are all one. And understandably, my chief had for generations been taught to hate the white people. The white people did some really horrendous things to the Native Americans. It was their land first, and they were just treated so atrociously, and their children were treated so, most notably by the Catholic Church in the reservation systems and the orphanages particularly. So, but to see or to hear Iron Eyes talk about how we're all one, I thought that was really cool. And then he also talks about the definite influence of religion and culture and the educational system with his people. And he also talks about the sacred cosmology and how we are all searching for that higher knowledge, that hidden knowledge, which is something that I've been saying for how long now, right? And I think it's a general consensus for a lot of people. We all seem to be searching for the answers and the missing pieces of the puzzle. So there's definitely a feeling of camaraderie that was established as I listened to this gentleman speak. And then he goes into his different deities, which I also found interesting. And he does broach this later on in the interview. There are like 13 or 16 of them that he just like rattles off. But the Essenes worshipped an earthly mother, the angel of the sun, fire, but the angel of the sun, the angel of water, the angel of air, and the Heavenly Father. And when he speaks about these beings that were here before us, something kind of pinged in me. And for some of you, this may be a stretch. You may not feel the same way as I do. But I thought, is he talking about these ascended people, these creatures or beings that were older than us that had all of this knowledge and this wisdom? Could it be possible that he's talking about the angels? Or, if you read the part of the Bible that talks about creation in Genesis, this is something that's been debated as long as I can remember. There's a verse in there that says, in Genesis 1:26, and this is the King James Version, "Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So I was just wondering if some of these deities that they worshipped, could it possibly be these angels that the Essenes were told to go to for assistance as well? And it's not exactly the same thing, because the natives and other cultures worship other deities, whereas in the Essene Gospels, Jesus tells his disciples and tells the people that he's teaching to pray to the angels and ask them for their assistance. And the angels of the different, as I said before, the sun, the water, and the air, are able to heal and help humanity, as well as praying to the earthly mother and the heavenly Father. And what I get from the Essene Gospels is the earthly mother is essentially Gaia, as the New Age terms it. The mother is the earth, and the father is the sky entity, or the Father God. It's the God that is the creator. So just interesting parallels, some differences there, but because everything is so skewered and our cultures are so diverse, and there are so many hidden stories and stories that were told, as in the Indian cultures, passed down verbally, orally, and our scriptures we know have been changed. Parts of the Bible have been changed and left out to take away our power, as you've heard me say at least 100 times. I just wonder, is that what they're praying to? And maybe they're seeing it in a different way because of how their history has recorded it. And so the Bible passage, "Let us make man in our image," is clearly and distinctly plural. And so for those people that I've had conversations with in the past that say to me, it's strictly in the Bible and there's no room for interpretation. If it's in the Bible as it's written, that's the way that it is. And it's not up to us to ascertain or investigate or try and figure out what happened. As it's written, as it is. Well, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, clearly indicates plurality. There's no way that you could misinterpret that. And that's without me even going off into my own thoughts as to, it's clearly there. It's plural. So these were the co-creators with God of mankind. Were they his peers? I don't believe so. Were they the angels? Possibly. Probably. Because, then we can go into the fall and all of that. And that's also something that he speaks of in his interview, Iron Eyes, is he talks about this. They have a figure that created the water, and so their people know and have known that the water was created before the sun, and that is also in line with Christian scriptures. So in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Like, it's there. And so at that time, in our knowledge, there was this primordial God, a deity, and its name is Ea. Now, we hand it down with the male personification and say that it's a he. But again, since I had daughters, like, they're like, why has it got to be a he? So it's an it. You know, it really is an it. It's beyond gender. And that this is Ea. And then in the time of that time, more than 5 billion years ago, that we know now, Ea became lonely. And Ea began to spin. And in order to create something else, so Ea wasn't lonely anymore, during this spinning, he caused this explosion of unimaginable proportions, intergalactic explosion. And in order to create, during this explosion, which I take to be the Big Bang, his power flowed from him, and his power was in his blood, and his blood is blue, was blue, is blue, and his blood is water. And this is how we know that water is older than the sun. Which I just read something in some scientific journal recently that scientists are confirming and discovering that water is in fact older than the sun. Wow. And we're just like, yeah, no shit, man.
Chase Iron Eyes also speaks about taking back your own power, and he does talk about free will earlier on in the interview, but taking back your own power, very interesting also to me as well, as it's something that I've been saying for a long time. And also that we have the ability to do lots of things we're maybe not capable of yet.
And it's not like I was raised with this. I had to learn it and do my best to seek it out. And since I was 9 years old, I've known different medicine. You know, I've only known medicine men, but there are medicine women. But I've known my first teacher was a very good man, very powerful man. He was kind of like an apprentice, or maybe disciple might be a word, just somebody who learned from one of our greatest healers, a man named Chief Frank Foolscrow. So, you know, I've been and I strayed from the path over my years. You know what I'm saying? I've not always been trying to stand upright, you know, in the light and in the power of creation. But that is our sacred ability. That's our authority, and it's there for us to do that. So why would we not do that?
So here's the part of the story where he's talking about the being that I spoke about earlier, the trickster being cast down to earth.
There's Tob, which is like the bear. You know, the bear is a very powerful being. It's one of our most powerful healers. The bear actually becomes what's known as Ksa, which is the bearer of righteous knowledge. The being that teaches us, you know, righteous esoteric knowledge. And before that, it was just that Ksa was a title. But Ksa used to serve the gods, and then worked with Unk to embarrass the gods, and let, you know, this woman, real beautiful woman, sit in the moon's place, and that embarrassed, you know, the moon, and so Shka banished Ksa, and I know there's a lot of Lakota words thrown around here. But he became the trickster. He became Iktomi because he disobeyed the gods. And he was sent with, you know, the other people that were associated with him to Earth. And so he was, you know, all of these contain truths, truths about who we are as human beings, and principles really to guide us in our evolution, in our thinking, in our conduct, in our behavior. The son didn't only, he also had a child, out of wedlock with this somebody that wasn't his wife. You know what I mean? And that child became the whirlwind, and the whirlwind is a god. There's the four, and then four, and then the bear, and then Tatanka, the buffalo. But not just the buffalo that is here. The buffalo here represents the sun, the power that, the life-giving power, but also a constellation of the buffalo. The spirit of the water is another god in the four-direction wind. The west, the north, the east, the south. In our language, we all have names for them. Wiochbeata, Waziata, Wiohiampata, Itokagata. And those are all, those directions are the sons of the wind, of Tate, and then the lower four gods, so to speak, are Nia, which is your breath. All of our breath, our collective breath. When we first come out of the womb, you're connected with your umbilical cord, and then you come into this reality, and you're able to take a breath. And as soon as you take that breath, now you're in union. Now you're part of the unitive power, the unitive experience that is there for us. And that's Nia. That's the breath is a god. And then there's the Nari, or the how do you say it? Like a ghost, like an eternal soul. The spirit that is here with your mind. And the whirlwind is that one of them, probably say the 15th god, and then your Sich'u, that is the lowest god, so to speak, and that is your mind, the human mind. It's very powerful still, though, to be in that, to even be in there. And when you, in the sweat lodge, the poles touch the earth at 16 points to represent that cosmology.
So he also goes to talk on about other gods, but what he calls the lesser god, or the god of breath, I also found interesting in that when he says it enters the body, you become a spirit of unity. So the breath enters the body, and you're human, so you're one with all of what I would consider humanity, which is something that we also know. And he does speak of the ghost, or a spirit, or your soul rather, which he says is connected with your mind. So he does mention the soul, but it's not in the same context that we believe. But the fact that there's a lesser god that is the soul, or the spirit, is also interesting to me. I think it's time for a musical break. I'd like to thank our stations for airing me, and I have 3 right now that air me. And I'd like to encourage all of you to please support the network. We are totally listener funded. Without you, we wouldn't be able to bring you these shows. Please go to the main page, check out some other shows that you may be interested in on the network, jump on the chat room if you feel so inclined, and any donations that you could bring to us would be so greatly appreciated, especially in these hard financial times. And if you can't, you can't. At least hopefully you're able to listen and enjoy some of the topics that myself and other podcasters have out here on the network for your listening enjoyment, and hopefully for your learning and enlightenment. But if you can, please donate whatever. Every little bit helps. We appreciate all of it. And if you have your own business and want to become a sponsor, please consider being a superstar by putting an ad on our network, whether it be on just my show or on the network in general. it's a great way to be able to get your name out there and be able to support something that you listen to and enjoy as well. If you don't have a professional advertisement, please get a hold of the owner. I'm sure he and the producer would love to be able to put something special together for you that you will be thoroughly happy with. It's just such a great way to be able to work hand in hand and support each other. My music tonight is provided by my good buddy Pat Carr. Pat is an amazing original artist, originally from Louisiana, and he's on SoundClick, he's on Reverb Nation, he's on YouTube, he is all over the place. He also provides my introductory and exit musics for my shows. Right now I just have this one, but I used to have 3, and I plan on branching out again and doing something a little different here, hopefully in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, Pat's just a great guy, and I love being able to play and support his music and have his music on my shows. You can reach him at http://www.itunes.com/Pat Carr. We'll be back right after this. Thank you for listening to the Positude Podcast with Maggie Hart. And oh, by the way, if you need some spiritual assistance, spiritual guidance, help with anxiety, depression, sleeplessness, just need some advice on some problems that you're having or some spiritual help, please reach out to me at Maggie, MAGGIE_Hart @outlook.com. And we're back for the second half of the Positude Podcast. I'm your host, Maggie Hart. That was my good buddy Pat Carr's song, Know the Blues, New Orleans Blues. Wow, I really miss the South. I miss the area, I miss the people, and I hope Pat and his family are doing well. I would just like to continue on with the first part of my show, which I'm talking about how I get messages from time to time, and I just have learned to listen to them about what I want to learn about or something that I need to hear. And this week the theme has been distinctly Native American, and I've been sharing some clips from a gentleman named Chase Iron Eyes from an interview on Aubrey Marcus, which is I guess a podcaster, and sharing some consistencies with the beliefs of his people, the Lakota people, and some Christianity, and also some personal beliefs that he elicits and exudes and talks about as they align with my personal beliefs. And I find it very fascinating. I hope you're enjoying the show. If you came back, you're enjoying the show, and I'm happy to see you here. But moving on, the host talks about how originally people lived and then things kind of went askew, and what he feels is something I vocalized repeatedly, and as many people have, that we need to get back to basics. We need to get back to the old ways. And Chase Iron Eyes addresses that as well.
We emerged from a cave. Did we emerge in this form? I don't know. The bones come from Eon, come from the stone. That's what's in our bones. Like elementally, we're finding out that that's true. And when you have big extraction, right, big oil coming, and I was just living my life. We were trying to legalize hemp, and we were trying to replace the petrochemical, industrial imposed reality of everything on the Standing Rock Reservation, right? In 2014, I moved back to Standing Rock, which is where I grew up. I now live on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And we're all the same people, though. We're all Lakota, just different bands. And people were always ask me, how come you're always protesting? Why are you always, don't you want to progress with civilization? And the way we see it, yes, we do. We do want to progress, but we want to redefine what civilization is. Civilization to us used to be able to go out and drink water from any stream or any river, and you just can't do that anymore. So it's the health of the ecosystem that undergirds how civilized we are as human beings. And when that debacle happened, where big oil forced this pipeline, we didn't want to fight that. In fact, we were just trying to mind our own business, and the oil company moved the location of the pipeline from Bismarck, North Dakota, which is a city that's like 90% Euro-American, to where the Indians live, right? Where the Standing Rock Nation is. And so we didn't have a choice, but we were standing up because oil and water don't mix, and it's just a matter of time before pipelines leak. And so we stood up. Not only that, but we have tribal sovereignty. We have a treaty with the United States. The United States is our friend. We made friends with the United States, with the Americans in 1851 and in 1868. And we said, we'll protect you. You'll protect us forever. We'll stand with your flag, the American flag, forever, so long as our flag can flow as well. This is but they don't teach that in the American educational institutions. So we were out there for those reasons, those political reasons, but we were out there by the tens of thousands for spiritual reasons as well. And when we were offering ourselves, our bodies, our reputations, our earning potentials, everything, we were just putting it on the line because we wanted a different reality. So we can push ourselves toward evolution, which is what I believe we're doing, and what I believe the United States is capable of. I believe our government is capable of that. But right now they've been captured.
Yeah.
They've been captured. There's no leaders over there. There's no spiritually driven leaders who are willing to take the steps that we need to take as a people, as a society, because we're all in this together now. There's no, it's all these classifications and differences that have been assigned to us, that we learned, that we've been conditioned to think from within, that we're trying to liberate from. But it's very difficult. It's obviously very difficult because there are real differences in our country. Man, when George Floyd was killed, the country almost burned to the ground. Like, it was very wild and serious, and obviously that systemic challenge we have to address. We have to address that. But for me, everything that is political or legislative or economic should be informed by a spiritual liberative process. And that happens here and here conceptually first. And I'm no expert on it. Like I'm not. There are men and women who are much older than me who know much more than me. But my path and my ability and my will to build bridges from this world that I was born into, this flesh and blood that I was born into, this consciousness, and trying to bridge that with the dominant consciousness, currently the dominant consciousness.
So there he gets into politics a little bit and talks about the fact that we don't have a spiritual leader and the importance of spirituality in our leadership. That's huge to me, and also concurrent with what I believe. I just find this whole interview very fascinating, and his perspectives extremely captivating and fascinating, and just real, just honest and real. It's about getting back to basics. It's about healing ourselves in the environment. It's about, the source and origins of humanity, depending on your belief structures, and just as a whole, it's all of that. It was really cool to me to, again, be guided to listen to something like this. And there were a couple others that I actually listened to as well in the course of this week, as I said earlier, but this one was my favorite by far. Then he goes into talking about ETs and the spirits, the good ETs, the bad ETs, which I equate to the spiritual beings, whether it be the Nephilim, the angels, the fallen angels, and their energies. And he does talk about the character that I relate to, a Satan type figure.
Have creation or knowledge about ETs and so forth, but we have I've asked medicine people about this, and all they tell me is that there are good ones just like us, and there are bad ones just like us. But there are also energies that work with that source, that negative source. And we have a certain name for them in Lakota, and Ikdo is one of those energies. Trickster is one way but it's more devious than that. It's to cause misery.
Yes. And
to revel in your misery, in the misery that we're creating.
Now here, when he's talking about the different energies, to me, that's where our free will comes into play. The misery that you self is creating, that's the ego to me, and the energies that swirl around that. So you have the influence of the good and the bad, but then it's up to you how you're going to deal with that, both on a conscious and on a subconscious level. In my opinion, the ego is going to play into that, and that's going to generate more misery for you. Or if you're more balanced of an individual and you've done your work and you've done your practice, then those things will sort of roll off to the side, or you'll be able to combat those inwardly. He also goes on to say that he doesn't know how, I think it was Sitting Bull or whoever, but another famous Indian perceived this philosophy, but he does say that in his opinion, those energies or those gods are also inside of us. So you have a little bit of a different philosophy there that has been also supported by other religions, in that there's the darkness and the good in everybody. And there's the old Indian saying where the grandfather is talking to his son, and he's talking about the white wolf and the bad wolf. And if the kid asks, well, which one will win? And the grandfather says, whichever one you feed. So that's their essential philosophy, and that's what they believe. But essentially, it's how you handle that energy that comes around you, that may be inside of you, is whether or not you will be victorious and stand in your faith and in your righteousness and be a good person, or whether you'll be a bad person. Which side will win? Which side are you going to feed, right?
We're in our time. They did what our ancestors, our grandfathers and grandmothers did what they could with what they had, and now we're in our time. We have to stand up. We have to empower ourselves. That's possible. There are stories. There are things that defy, things that have happened to me that defy kind of the physical understanding, like what your physics professor might understand and what they might teach. Teleportation. I've not seen that, but I know people who were there when these certain teleportation occurrences have happened. Miraculous healings. Some might call it faith-based healing, or maybe an activation of the cells is occurring. Something beyond our understanding. That's why we use the drum and the voice too. The drum and the voice are two very sacred powers that we have as human beings, because they can pierce corporeal reality, right? In the world of waves and frequencies and vibrations, things that other beings are perceiving are not necessarily what we're perceiving as human beings. We have a different capacity, but the voice is something you sing on an appropriate song. The songs that we're singing in the lodge allow those veils to be pierced, and maybe something came for you or something, but it's not that I want to say that I believe, like I know, you know what I mean? There's a belief that requires faith, and then there's like oh shit, I know.
Yeah.
And we better equip ourselves. That's kind of how I see it.
So there he talks about some supernatural phenomena and things, like faith healings, but then he also expounds upon how he has that inner knowing and he has to have faith because he knows, he has that inner knowing. So there again, another tie to both myself, and I'm sure a lot of you out there have had similar occasions and occurrences where you've had maybe a supernatural experience, and you don't really understand it. However, you also have had a sense of just knowing, a gut feeling, and you just know inside of you that what you're hearing or listening to or experiencing is right. And that, to me, also, I'm going to bring that around to the Essenes again, because they were a very mystic people. They were also extremely respectful of nature. In fact, they were vegetarians. They did not eat meat, at least according to the translation of that gospel that we have. Now, something that just to kind of veer off the subject for a minute, something that I've often wondered also is, did the person who says he's translated the Essene Gospels, he was also known to be a naturalist and a vegetarian. Is that maybe his personal spin that he put on the whole Essene Gospel? Because when we look at scriptures as a whole, I get the general understanding, I'm not sure how many of you feel about that we did eat meat, that Jesus, it's never really said that he ate meat, he ate fish, but you just you get that vibe that, he did eat meat. Now, it doesn't say it, just my feeling, and God told us that we could have meat, right? And then also going back to, and this was the other thing I found fascinating, was the music and the drumming and the sounds, which is something that I've been researching for almost a year now, but in general for a much longer period of time than that. It's just something I've been paying more attention to, most markedly in the past couple of months. Is people have heard me say on my shows before and in interviews that I believe that the things like the pyramid and that were created by sound and energetic movement, right? So the drum and the sacred sounds and the music and the chanting, all of that in light of our spirituality is so important. That's why Christians sing. We sing, and just the feeling that you get when you sing, and Buddhists, the sounds that they make, just as a whole, culturally, we are aware in some sects, but are we truly aware of the power of sound in healing? The power of sound in scientifically being able to move something, or to be able to change our cellular structures so that we're able to bilocate, things like that. So just a lot of parallels in this interview. And as I said earlier, a lot of parallels to me as far as the Essene way of life, and just as a whole. The fact that this guy has just such a firm grip on humanity and what it means, what it's supposed to mean, and his spirit of joining together. The fact that he talked about what he talked about as far as the treaty with the United States, and how people weren't privy to that and aren't being taught that in the public schools, that wasn't something that I was aware of. I don't know about you, but I wasn't aware that the treaty said that, the United States will protect the Indians, and the Indians will stand by the American flag as long as they're able to fly theirs in unison. So all interesting stuff here, and food for thought. And again, I'm so thankful for the information that falls into my lap, and it's just, I'm guided to listen to, because I always get some sort of knowledge, or I always come away with some sort of feeling of affirmation, like, wow, I was supposed to listen to that, look how much I got out of that. And I'm hoping that you, after listening to these tidbits, were able to get something out of that as well. And I would like for you to be open to the Essene Gospels and check those out and study those if you have a chance. They have them on YouTube, so if you're not a reader, you can listen to them. And if you'd like to hear this full interview again, it's on Aubrey Marcus, and the interview is called The Sacred Cosmology and Forgotten Wisdom of the Lakota with Chase Iron Eyes. So in conclusion tonight, it's just so cool to me to hear other people talking in different media circles about the fact that we're all one, the fact that they have congruent belief structures with ours, the fact that all of this, the saving of our planet, the respect and reverence that we should be having for nature, the benefits of living a natural life and a clean life. He mentioned being able to go anywhere and drink clean water. All of these things are so important, especially in light of the changes that are being made on our planet, environmentally speaking, that are totally not by our choice, or at least for the most part not by our choice, in regards to things like chemtrails and GMOs and poisoned water, and I could go on and on. So I hope that you enjoyed tonight's show. I enjoyed being able to share some of this with you, and it just left me with a really good feeling of just something that I've been feeling for about 2 or 3 months, especially. The interviews that I listen to, the podcasts that I listen to, people are coming together. They are forming bonds. They are sharing positive messages that we are all one, and that together we can make a difference. And I think that's really the message that I wanted to bring to everybody tonight. So please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening, and please get a hold of me at Maggie_Hart@outlook.com for all of your spiritual needs. Thanks, and have a good night. Bye-bye.